Welcome back to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at the next Gord the Rogue. It's going to be Sea of Death by Gygax. This is the next installment in the Gord the Rogue in the reading order I prefer. So this would be now the fourth book in the series of 7, and as well as some short stories that I've already touched on. One of the short stories outside the books, and then there's some more coming. So basically the Sea of Death sees the struggle of Gord versus the forces of evil to gain the second part of the Theor part, which is the artifact of evil introduced in the second book. And we find that whoever commands these different portions, of which there are 3, has a tremendous amount of power, but each of the pieces, once assembled, neutral evil, lawful evil, and chaotic evil being represented by the 3 pieces, once those 3 are assembled, it frees Thurisdan, the sleeping god, a very Cthulhu-like god who wants to invade our cosmos and eat everything and be nasty. So this is Gord's struggle to prevent the second part of the Theor part from falling into the hands of evil. So today on page 121, Sea of Death by Gygax. One quick aside, I forgot to mention in my opening, there will be spoilers in this video. If you plan on reading this novel and don't want any spoilers, go ahead and tune out now. And when I say spoilers, I'm going to say how the book ends. So you've been warned. If you don't want to know how this one comes out, exit the video now. All right, in today's video, we're going to take a little closer look at the map because these are some environs that were not very well fleshed out, and they see some real life in this particular Gord novel. It's one of the reasons this was one of my favorites. As I said before, ask me on a Tuesday which one's my favorite, I might say Artifact of Evil. On a Wednesday, I might say Sea of Death. So this one starts out in Ket, which is kind of a Middle East type setting, the blend between the eastern Auric and the western portions. And then we come down into the plains of Paynims, through All, and into the through the dry steppes, and down to the Sea of Dust. And we go specifically in the Sea of Dust, we're going to the Forgotten City, or as it's called there in the novel, the City Out of Mind. This is pretty interesting because also Gord spends a lot of the time under the Sea of Dust, walking the old ruins of the old kingdom that was destroyed here, and he may or may not be taking Slorotin's tunnel, which would be somewhere right along in here, out into the Omenary, or actually he goes into the Hold of the Sea Princes, so it would be somewhere right here. It's interesting, it's not called that, but it might be. So I just wanted to give a quick look at the map of where Gord will be going, and now on to our regularly scheduled book look. All right, Sea of Death by Gygax, published in June of '87. These did come out rapid fire from Gygax. That's a good thing, by the way. I liked that they came out so quickly. So in this one, 2 different groups of evil are sent on a quest to the City Out of Mind, which is the Forgotten City in the Sea of Dust, of the old Sul Empire. And their quest is to retrieve an artifact, the second part of the Theor part, that would, when assembled with the other 2 parts, release Thurisdan on the cosmos, and he would be evil and eat us all. The evil forces want it because whoever controls a chunk of the Theor part has tremendous power, and the evil people also feel if Ayus has the chaotic, or someone has the chaotic evil, and somebody else has the lawful evil, and someone has the neutral evil, the 3 parts will never be assembled, and Thurisdan will never arise. The forces of neutrality say, wrong, that's not how this works. Once all 3 Theor parts are active and being used, they'll find a way, a la the One Ring. They will find a way to get their master, free it, get together and free it. So neutrality says, hey, what we ought to do is free Thurisdan now, and our champion, who we're rapidly realizing is Gord, can then go in and destroy Thurisdan before Thurisdan has a chance to kind of fully awaken and consolidate his power. That's for the next couple of books. For this book, we're just going to deal with the Sea of Death, which is 2 forces of evil, one sponsored by Ayuz, Igwilv, and Zugdmoy, and their champion is Obmi, the dwarf from the second novel, Artifact of Evil, and from the Giants modules. He's also in Castle Greyhawk, if I'm not mistaken. I love Obmi. He has appeared many times in my campaign. A dwarf with a Girdle of Giant Strength, a Dwarven Thrower, and Boots of Speed. What's not to love? My players hate Obmi. And he is opposed by a group that is sponsored by Grotst, who is Ayuz's dad and Igwil's consort at one time. And they are he is sponsoring Eclavdra of House Isleserves. Yes, the same one from the Vault of the Drow. Eclavdra is in here. She is in her phase of worshipping Grotst. And off she goes to do his bidding. The rules of the Theopart are simple. It can only be retrieved by mortals, and those mortals must traverse great distances and overcome great hazards in order to retrieve it. Alignment is not an issue. So these two parties of evil are taking to the Sea of Dust, and they're going to try to get to the City Out of Mind. And Gord, for his part, is saying, well, I'll go, and I'll take on, I'll try to get it before they can and snatch it out from underneath them. So there's our premise for Sea of Death. Again, we get a neat little picture of Gord fighting an old Sul warrior. And here we have a nice little map. So basically, the book starts out, the first chapter deals with our bad guys getting together and deciding where that their champions will bring the artifact once it's retrieved. Yolakland in the land of Yal is favorable. That would be the yeomanry, by my interpretation. You got to remember, this was after Gygax left TSR, so he couldn't use a lot of the place names from Greyhawk. And then, so that's Yal, which I'm taking to be the yeomanry. And then the other is Okerfort in the land of the Sea Kings, which I'm taking to be the hold of the Sea Princes. And this is where I talked about possibly they take Slorotin's tunnel up and out through the hold of the Sea Princes, so the Sea Kings. So they're going to go to one of those two places. Whichever mortal lands there first is declared the winner. So off we go. We follow their travels. We also follow Gord's. Gord gets captured for a little while by some natives of the steppes, and he's their prisoner for a bit, but he does escape eventually. And during his escape, shortly after, he discovers an elven woman alone on a horse, having fled a caravan that group of Gord's captors destroyed. And Gord helps her out, and they start traveling together. And this elven woman has a mysterious past. She can't remember who she is, what she's doing out there. We find out later, as this elven woman becomes more and more like a dark elf, as Gord and she go through the Sea of Dust, or the Sea of Death, we find that she is actually a clone of Eclavdra. And her mission, of course, because D&D clones don't like their original parent, her mission is to get the Theopart, but more importantly for her personally, to destroy Eclavdra. Because of this, she can also sense where Eclavdra is, if given time to concentrate. So it's kind of interesting, because now she's got a little tracker on Eclavdra. And the book goes on, and the book is a lot of fun. Gary Gygax does a really nice section in here where he talks about the life in the Sea of Dust. By the way, I will be calling it the Sea of Dust, because that's what I'm used to it. And he talks about the life that goes on there, even though it's all has been destroyed. I like it. I like it a lot. So the Gord makes his way under the desert. Under the desert for the most part, and gets his way to the City Out of Mind. And by coincidence, happenstance, the fate of Istus, who knows, he gets there right about the same time as Eclavdra and Obmi and their parties. There's a mad dash to try to capture the Theopart. Gord is very close to getting it when he's hit by a lightning bolt and seemingly killed. Eclavdra leaves with the Theopart. She's heading for the one of the safe havens in either yeomanry or the hold of Sea Princes. She's heading for Sea Princes. Lena, who is Eclavdra's clone, that mysterious female elf, ends up thinking Gord is dead. She teams up with Obmi because she wants to destroy Eclavdra, and Obmi wants the artifact. And she says, hey, I don't care about the artifact. I want to kill Eclavdra. So off they go. In the meantime, Gord is not dead. Gord is very much alive. He and Lita, the good clone, of Eclavdra have worked together to free some slaves, to stir up an uprising, to disturb the city out of mind. It's kind of neat because the city out of mind is peopled by degenerated Sul people. They've lost physical stature. They're very white from living underground. Their eyesight's not great. Just really nice look at it. I've used elements of this in my campaign. I like this book. Anyway, long story short, they're heading to the Hold of the Sea Princes, and by fate again, they all get there about the same time, and a big fight ensues. Gord fighting Obmi, and Lita fighting Eclavdra. Gord destroys Obmi, in part by his ability to turn to a panther. He rips Obmi to pieces because Obmi was regenerating like crazy, so Gord's finally able to rip him to pieces. And Lita defeats Eclavdra. So neutrality has won. Except Viran appears. He's an albino demon who serves Grast. And this is a very interesting character because he is, for all purposes, lawful evil and lives in a community of chaotic evil. But it's his very strangeness that makes him so valuable to his Lord Grast. And he's very loyal to Grast. Both are very interesting aspects of the character. I thought this is a very interesting character. But he convinces Gord and Lita that it would be best if Lita were to impersonate Eclavdra and were to proceed to take the Theropart down to the abyss, thereby keeping it away from Ayuz and the possibility of Ayuz having two parts, which they feel would inevitably draw the third and awaken Thurisdan. Gord, having fallen in love with Lita, doesn't want her to do this, but she makes the sacrifice for the greater good, and off she goes, posing as Eclavdra down to the abyss, while Gord leaves the Hold of the Sea Princes dejectedly and into the next book. So I enjoy Sea of Death. I enjoy all the Gord the Rogue books. I like this one particularly. The only reason I sometimes feel I like the Artifact of Evil more is that's more of a party. The party in this one is Gord and Lita. There's no real party feel to this one. And the early go of this book feels very much, when Gord is alone, it feels very much like an old Conan again. And I've said that before. And that's not meant as a criticism. I enjoy the old Conans, and I feel Gary Gygax must have, and he uses quite a bit of that flavor in his writing. So there you have the Sea of Death and the recovery of the second of the three Theroparts. And in the next book, we're actually going to take a little step sideways and backward into City of Hawks. And I'm going to go into that book a little bit and why I read that next in my reading order. So that's it for today for page 121. I hope that you like what you heard and saw. And if you did, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.